G'day, legends. I hope that you are having a great day. Happy Friday, happy end to the week. I hope that you have a fantastic weekend set up ahead of you. Now, today, we normally talk Israel, Ukraine, but we're going to talk Ukraine again, as tomorrow I've got an intel bloke coming on, like an ex-army intelligence guy coming on to talk with me about Israel tomorrow. And also today I've got a little bit of footage to show you. Most of that will be in the end when we talk about the maps, but we'll show you bits and pieces throughout. So the first one I want to show you is this incredibly lucky Russian fighter jet here, almost being hit by a Grad launcher. Now let's turn this down. So this is the Grad launcher here and this Su-25 aircraft. Unbelievably close. As we know, blue on blues happen. Now, of course, Grad is not air defense. Grad is an artillery rocket, artillery rocket system, but would definitely take it out if it bloody hit it. So that is rightfully named old brown pants for the flight suit of that pilot. Anyway, Ukraine got some good and some bad news today. So let's start with, I guess, the bad. US Congress has departed on 3 weeks of Christmas leave, and they haven't come to a deal on Ukrainian aid. Although hope is not lost, the Senate has vowed to work next week, and I suggest it's probably going to be huge overtime pay for them to try and finalise the deal going forward. As we know, over $110 billion deal put forward. That included majority of that to Ukraine, then Israel, the southern border, and also Taiwan. But the ones most desperate for it is definitely Ukraine. So that can still go through next week, and they are really wanting to get something across the line with those negotiations. We won't know exactly how it will look at the end of the week. Now, it's probably going to be less money, but something will go through. They will find a happy medium somewhere between the Republicans and the Democrats in Congress. Now, speaking of Congress did today approve nuclear submarines for Australia in the long-awaited AUKUS deal. For those not aware, Australia was going to go with French submarines, but if you looked at any French vehicles, they're a little bit iffy sometimes, and there was some talk, at least about in circles that I've run in, about how the security of them was run, and also if there was any leaks in that as well. But we got a better deal between the US and the UK for nuclear-powered submarines instead of the diesel subs. So we wasted a bit of money. France cracked the shits with us, although, you know, we have tens and tens of thousands of our boys lying in France's fields, who to defending their nation. They still crack the shits with us on defense related when it was just money, but whatever. So to fill the capability between the actual starting the building of them, we will get 3 Virginia-class nuclear submarines from the US, and that will start building that capability. Now, once they start getting built, they're getting built only a few kilometers from my house. So this is a deal over the coming decades. It's a long, long deal, up 50 years sort of deal, and $368 billion. Government contract, double that. That said, it's either going to make my house go up in value or down in value, depending how people react, I guess, to nuclear stuff. Anyway, the people gluing their hand to things and chucking paint on paintings, I don't see how they're not behind nuclear energy. And in my belief, this should have been here a decade or more ago. Just look at where Australia is. Look at Australia on a map. How do we not just pour our military expenditure that we have anyway into the best submarines and navy we can possibly have? At the end of the day, if people land in Australia, what real good is me with a rifle actually going to do at that point? And I think this is well sort of double-pronged. I think this is a dip the toe in the water for nuclear energy for Australia, to actually see how the public will react to this, as we will be the only country that doesn't have any nuclear power plants feeding into the grid with a nuclear capability of submarines. So we're the only country with that. So I think that may be part of how do they react to it. Can we actually have this? And there has been a demonstration down from me against nuclear power. And of course, the nuclear subs, and they use things like Chernobyl and bombs, which we know just is completely unrelated. And that demonstration consisted of like 8 oldies in ponchos who then probably went back to their beachfront property after lecturing people on cheap energy and nuclear physics. So I think that is exciting for Australia's sort of the whole defense there and stepping forward when our defense and Australia can move forward at absolute snail pace. But good news for Ukraine as well, as the European Union has decided to open up accession negotiations for Ukraine. Now, the process between opening negotiations and Ukraine becoming a member, this will take years and years. So it's nothing quick. It's not like Ukraine is now just in the EU. But Zelensky has called the agreement a victory for Ukraine, a victory for all of Europe. History is made by those who don't get tired of fighting for freedom. Now, the Hungarian Prime Minister Orbán, he vowed to block this decision, and he held a veto power and was asked not to be present at this actually meeting. So it was actually pretty funny how this actually came through in the EU. So we are going to actually have a look over how this unfolded, as I think this is some tricky politics. I think some people will think that this isn't kosher, but let's go over how this actually then happened. So Orbán said his opposition remained steadfast, but with unanimous decision required, he decided to let his right to oppose lapse because the 26 others were arguing strongly in favour. An abstention from him was not enough to stop the decision from being adopted. An EU official, who asked not to be identified because the summit negotiations were private, said Orbán was momentarily absent from the room in pre-agreed and constructive manner while the decision was made. So Orbán wasn't in the room when the decision was actually made for Ukraine to come in. So let's have a look at this. If Orbán wasn't willing to agree to opening enlargement talks with Kyiv, Chancellor Olaf Scholz suggested. Olaf Scholz has been heavily criticised by the Ukrainian crowd about earlier in the war, although now people are turning back in favour of him. He should consider leaving the room briefly. Scholz addressed the recommendation to the Hungarian leader in front of the EU counterparts gathered around the circular negotiation table at the leaders' summit. The idea, Scholz said, would allow the 26 EU leaders who remain to approve Ukraine's road to accession with the required unanimity, which EU rules say is also fulfilled if one leader is absent, while Orbán could still say he hadn't voted in favour. So I guess Orbán now, if Putin comes to him or whatever, he can't say I didn't vote against or he didn't vote in favour. He wasn't present. And the EU rules say that if one leader's not there and everyone else agrees, then it goes through. So this is where the tricky politics is in this. By Orbán not being in the room, the other 26 could rule out Hungary's vote in this. And there are people that are very upset about this. And I've read through his social media and people being like, you went against it or you're a pussy, all of that, all the way through to, you're a Kremlin propagandist. It was just interesting to get a feel on how people is. And realistically, I think in his comments was maybe 70% just hating him and 30% hating him for being like, you didn't stick to your word, which I understand that too. After the two men spoke on the sidelines, Orbán left the room, paving the way for EU's historic decision to open accession negotiations with Ukraine after days of uncertainty given Orbán's vehement opposition. Scholz's remarkable strategy was described by Politico by three officials with knowledge of events, raised eyebrows in Brussels and beyond. The Chancellor's performance on the European stage since he was appointed in 21 has been a disappointment so far, with critics noting his lack of tactical negotiating and communication skills compared to former Chancellor. The idea that an EU leader had to leave the room to be unanimous is highly unusual. In fact, EU officials and diplomats at the summit on Thursday could not say if Scholz's move had ever been used before. He used an old trick from his time with the Young Socialists, said one official at the EU summit, referring to the youth organisation of Scholz's Social Democratic Party, the SPD, in which the Chancellor served as deputy chairman in the 1980s. So definitely some tricky political stuff going on there. But as well, I guess you could say it, if Orbán hasn't gone against it, then he's gone with it. So you could say he could have vetoed it. He could have just gone and gone no and vetoed it. So if he hasn't actually done that, I think maybe it could be swinging around there. We may see a change there, but you're going to hear about something more in a second. But he said, Hungary's perspective is clear. Ukraine is not ready for us to begin negotiations on its EU membership. It's a completely illogical, irrational, and improper decision. Hungary doesn't want to share in this bad decision, which is why Hungary abstained from today's decision. So that's why they weren't there. So if it does go to shit, they can be like, wasn't bloody us. And took to social media to say. And while this will take time, no one knows where this war will end, what the political, geographical, economic situation will be inside Ukraine where this war ends. And it could go 0 to 100. We currently have no idea when the guns fall silent, where this will actually end and how those negotiations will take place. So, of course, yes, Ukraine is ramping up to get ready for EU membership and meet that Copenhagen criteria to get into the EU. But at the end of the day, we don't know where this is actually going to fall. And then only a few hours later, Orban vetoed the €50 billion EU aid package for Ukraine. Now, in a huge press conference today, Putin has vowed to continue his, what he calls, special military operation in Ukraine. Now, there are some bits that I think you will find interesting, and you can actually look up as well on the Kremlin's website the full rundown of what he said, because of course it's in Russian, but you can translate it to English there. But just know that with things like this, it is highly scripted. Some of it isn't, but some of it also is. Now, he says, there will be peace when we achieve our goals. Let's return to these goals. They have not changed. I'll remind you of what we talked about then. The denazification of Ukraine, its demilitarization, and its neutral status. As for demilitarization, if they don't want to come to an agreement, then we are forced to take other measures, including military ones. We are forced to take other measures, including military ones, or we will agree on certain terms. By the way, we agreed these in talks with Istanbul, but then these agreements were scrapped. But we'd agreed on this. There are other possibilities, either reach an agreement or resolve it by force. This is what we will strive for. So talking about that there was agreements made, then got turned around, and that they will continue militarily how the war is going. He also says, along the entire front line of contact, our armed forces, to put it modestly, are improving their position. Almost everyone is active throughout the entire front line. And we're going to have a look at the maps and see where it is actually moving. But in this, Russia does seem to be improving their position on the front line. Over the past month, they have made significant amounts of ground. And when I say significant, I mean relative to the movements we've seen by Ukraine and Russia in the last 12 months. Now, he's also talked about what's happening in Gaza and described it as a catastrophe and that it's nothing like Ukraine. He also says today, Ukraine produces almost nothing. Excuse my vulgarity, but everything is being bought in as a freebie. But those freebies could run out at some point. And it seems that they are gradually running out. Now, speaking about that, of course, Ukraine is completely reliant on foreign aid going in and donated foreign aid. And this actually links into a conversation I had on the phone last night with, well, your favorite Soldier X, and he made a good point really along these same lines, saying that Ukraine really needs to focus on producing not only their own systems and putting their own weapons, but also getting some money from producing goods, agricultural. Of course, I know this is very difficult. It's a lot easier to say, and Ukraine is trying to, but they need to do that to try and buy and pay for systems out of their own money and trying to be not as reliant on the West, because this total reliance on the West, it can be unreliable. It can be cut off. And this is exactly what we're seeing in the EU and America. And so far, yes, this hasn't been cut off. It has been successful. But at the end of the day, we don't know the future going forward here. And one thing he did note, though, is that for this to be successful, far, far more about corruption actually needs to be achieved before this would actually be working and take some further reliance off the West away to produce, make, buy all of these systems. Now, also, I can't show you this video. It's on my Telegram if you'd like to watch it here, but I do want to talk a little bit about this. Now, some people have talked about the authenticity of this clip. Now, I can't tell you if it's real or fake, but what I do want to talk about is the use of thermal optics. Now, what we see is this guy here taking a leak and these two guys crawling up behind him, and then he gets him with a knife. But you can actually see as well the use of thermal cloaks on both of these guys here. Now, the use of thermal optics is, of course, all throughout the battlefield and has really been a big change for war in general, along with night optics. And this is from a drone, so these thermal optics, the actual quality will be fairly, I guess, low end compared to other optics that are out there. But you can just see how amazing that this thermal actually is. And it's not that easy to defeat thermal, but you can do it. Now, of course, things like the Javelin clue, the Javelin missile rocket thing, you've got the tube, and then you've got the little thing you bloody actually aim on. That's called the clue. That has a really high-end thermal in it, and we use it all the time in Overwatch positions without the missile on it, because if the missile's on it, you have to fire in a certain amount of time with the cooling, blah, blah, blah. But we use that for Overwatch all the time. Now, you can slap a rocket on it, but you can use it really good thermal optics. Now, one of the things that actually can really work to defeat thermal is something like a space blanket, like the ones you'd have in like an emergency situation. And I'll actually show you. I've got one here, because not all of them are just silver space blankets. So this is actually my new medical kit. It's called the Slav Pack. Apparently the Adidas, it's cool. I like it. But so this is my casualty space blanket here as well. So it is like an olive drab, but it is still a space blanket. All the same, silver one side, green the other, to be in like military medical stuff. And that works for reduction of signature. Also, there are uniforms that reduce signature, and these capes you're seeing developed, Ukraine are developing them as well, are becoming more and more popular into the future with drones like this that can just use thermal. Absolutely will be everywhere, and to try and reduce that signature is also a massive, massive thing. So this went along with the post. Now, again, grain of salt. So, explainable soldiers. In the video, Nightingale and I were undercover 30th artist and the watcher of Armball, which is a Nightbird drone loaded with 2 Volks grenades. Crawled under the thermal capes to a small dugout. There was 1 watcher and 2 were sleeping inside. Crawled back to relieve himself, take a piss. Due to close distance, the impossibility of quickly getting to the gun. Since the belt from it got stuck between the shoulder pad and the armor, I had to go all in and knifed him. While I was finishing off the watcher, Nightingale threw a grenade in the dugout. So that is that footage there. And some of the close range fighting we're seeing is unbelievable. Now, I didn't mention in this, these guys crawling up are Russian soldiers there. And I talked about today that actually should be, I think there should be a law of armed conflict that you can't engage guys taking a piss or a poo. Like, I think there should be like 5 minutes a day. Like, no, you can't. It's a dog act, I tell you. But anyway, we're going to have then a look over the maps and a little bit more footage here as well. So, of course, we have the deep state map here. This is Ukraine, the centre, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupied since 22 and the purple since 14. Now, we have seen more footage around this area here, this of course being Thankyou. Now, I can't show you any of that footage here because it's pretty savage. We hear a lot of claims about what's happening here, but as far as any movements on the map, we're just not seeing it. We're not seeing any movements through Robertini either. We're not seeing any in Rozhany. Now, the first place we actually see them is then in Novomakhalivka in this region. So let's just look on the deep state, roll back a day or two, and we don't see really much here. But we just do see a few days back just the expansion of grey zone. Of course, this bit we're going to talk about in Mariinka, but let's have a look at what then Suryak says in this region. So Russian army had made significant advances to the outskirts of Novomakhalivka, reaching the first buildings of the town from 2 different axes. So talking on an axis here and here, that they had reached bits of the town. So talking about from here and here. So we are yet to actually see this then on the map, but it is interesting to talk about and see what this will actually move maybe in the next day or so into here. And we do know that there is this sort of 3 areas in here which are significant for both Ukraine and Russia. Of course, it's Vuhledar, Mariinka, Novomakhalivka, of course, connected by this road here. And if you could cut off an area in here as well, this could become very under control and have definitely an effect. So you're pushing here, here, and here. Of course, Russia's made a big push down here as well to try and cut then this road. But we do know this road, although it supplies a lot into for Ukraine into Mariinka, of course, it can do the exact opposite and can make a move for Russia into Kharkov up here too. So then let's actually then move on to, if I can get rid of all of this, look at this, I'm bloody learning technology, into Mariinka. and have a look at what has moved here. And we can see that the majority of Mariinka has come under control of the Russian forces, as shown by the Ukrainian map here. And what people are saying is this main goal here is to try and push to Kurakovi in here, eventually down here. Now, that's still a long way off, but let's look at then what Suryak actually says here. So Mariinka, we've got a couple of maps here. So Russian army began advancing towards the last area of Mariinka under the control over Ukrainian army, taking control over new parts. 95% of the town is under Russian control now. So let's have a look where this is actually saying. So it's saying right out to here. And if we can have a look on then Google Earth we're a little bit higher there in this region. So this is, of course, Suryak maps on Google Earth. And you can see, so we'll go back to, this is Kurakovo here. And then, of course, Mariinka down here. And this is where Ukraine is still having these main lines of communication are still open into here. But of course, this area has been just absolutely pounded by everything. But Russia has moved up into this area. So you get a better idea of exactly how this is looking here. It's fairly flat ground, but the rubble, everything in here has made very difficult for armoured movements and as well as the personnel on the ground. But we do believe that that is the main objective for Russia in this region, is to get not only to Kurakovo, but cut off between Novomakalivka and then Ugledar, which is down in this region here. Sorry, I've had my bloody map the wrong way. But we are going to then talk about the movements made just to the south of Mariinka, as we have seen Russia extend their control down here in the last couple of days. We have an update then from what are they called? Suryak on this. Russian army continue advancing south of Mariinka towards the village of Pobojida. Towards the front was corrected there. So are pushing, of course, down this way. And let's have a look at how this actually looks then on the ground down here. So, of course, this is that area here. And this looks a hell of a lot different at the moment here than this does because, of course, the snow's come in. It's very, very cold. But the fighting is really between trench line to trench line, tree line to tree line. So they are pushing, Russians are pushing down this tree line. And I guarantee there will be grenade positions, automatic grenade positions in both of these tree lines, and there will be attacks out across here with armoured vehicles as well. So trying to, I guess, what I would see is trying to get a position down into this, push up to here, to actually have fire across here, maybe a push to here, to continue fire down into here. Now, this, of course, is very oversimplified. I don't really like trying to talk about exactly what the tactics will actually be here because you never know with the actual commanders on the ground of how that is going to look. They may not need to actually assault it directly to have the same effect on that at the moment, but it is seeming maybe that is how it is looking. So let me get rid of a couple of these so I don't get too caught up in my own BS. Now, we're going to move up into Avdiivka. This is where most of the eyes are at the moment in Ukraine as far as where Russian positions are being made. So let's have a look down to the south here near Nevelsky here. We do see that Russia did make some ground just down in the south here. Now, I don't have that currently on a Suryak map to talk about, I don't believe. So let's look in the center of Avdiivka. We saw this slight push out yesterday, and then we did see that Russia made a little bit more ground near Stepovy here as well. We do know that they have got some of the sort of high ground in that rolling area as Avdiivka sits in a bit of a bowl. So let's have a look here. Russian army advanced northwards along the railway. Moreover, troops took control over the flanks of Stepovy, thus taking control over most of the village. So I've crossed the train line and had a push down this. So let's actually have a look. So have pushed down this railway line here. We know the railway lines are incredibly important in this war. Of course, Russia, Ukraine, and a lot of other countries, but are ex-Soviet states. So Soviet-era railway was incredibly important for the Soviet Union. So we see this railway here, and Russia is still very heavily reliant on railway. Railway is very easy to take out, but it's also very, very easy to rebuild. So what we saw only yesterday was Russia was more down into here, and they have made an advancement out of then this tree line here and have moved into this tree line and the first blocks of Stepovy here, as well as an advancement up a tree line and then down along here. So are having some success there, as well as, if I can, oh my God, I'll get rid of that in a sec. An advancement then down here. Now, of course, this bend, oh, geez, what have I done? This bend is going to be very difficult here as well, because once you get past this, there may be just direct fire down here. But this is why these wars are hell on earth, is the actual amount of cover out here, very little. You're sort of relying on tree lines, trench systems that will be along the tree lines. You're relying on a hell of a lot of this. But of course, now that the war is moving so little at a time, everyone knows where everyone is. The amount of like sneak attacks that are going to happen with the amount of ISR just from civilian level drones is massive, that you're not going to get away with it without having massive casualties in any movement. Now, then we are going to then move to Bakhmut. So we are a little bit then high. So of course here is Bakhmut. Let's have a look and see. I'm on the wrong map. I wish Surak's, like, this map is fantastic, but you wish you could skip through days. So let's have a look back. Let's go to the 12th. So we see this movement we talked about yesterday's up in the dashes here on the outskirts of Bakhmut, recovering some positions. But then through to today, I don't see any real changes there. Let's zoom out just a little bit. No real change there. Let's see what Surak then says. Russian army continued advancing along the railway east of Bonanivka and took control more trenches adjacent to the road at Chasiv Yar. So a advancement just out here. So we're talking this advancement down here along then this railway. So let's actually have a zoom in then on this map so you can see this is where this railway is. This is the same railway. So it is saying they had more of a push across there. This maps are slightly different where GPSat's saying it's slightly in here, but it's saying that Russia did push down this railway. Like we just spoke about, railways incredibly important, and that there has been a push out into here. And then pushing, of course, this is Bonanivka here, that's right on the outskirts of here, but then also talking about the road through into Bakhmut. So we are upside down, but this is the road then here that goes into Kremove. We know this road because that was at one point one of the roads of life. Of course, the other one was then through Ivanovsky into Bakhmut there to try and get more push down and control on this road. And as you can see, Russia are somewhat on the downslope of a hill here. That the high ground is still here, but there is a lot of low ground down into Ivanovsky down in there as well. These are all rolling hills here, and it's actually more in real life than these maps actually show. And then we're just going to push up from Bakhmut a little bit. Of course, here we have Seversk and then Rozdilivka in here. Scroll back a couple of days. This is where we have seen some Russian gain. I'm not seeing it at the moment, but Surak, what is Surak saying about here? Situation, Eastern Front, Russian army advanced towards the town of Rozdilivka, taking control part of the trench built by Ukrainian army in the last months. So down in this area here, here we go. So pushing up here, and I believe these are showing fairly similar. So taking some control and near to by, let's have a look how far, under a kilometre from the outskirts of Rozdilivka there. And as we know that they're probably trying to push on the flanks fairly hard here, of course down Rozdilivka front and of course Kremenar Forest, to try and do what they're doing, what they did in Bakhmut, where they're trying to do in Avdiivka, to try and do that to Seversk. But of course we know they're making some ground on this, on the southern flank. Northern flank, not really that much. One thing we do know is it's very, very difficult in this Kremenar Forest. This forest alone has claimed thousands, if not tens of thousands of Russian and Ukrainian lives here, with the front line doesn't really move that much. We see the only blue, this blue here, this is within 2 weeks, Ukraine has made some gain, but this is just back and forward in here, and it's absolutely hell on earth. Now, we don't see any changes up and down the map from yesterday till today. We did talk about yesterday Russia's push into Sinkivka. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about Sinkivka. I believe this is a very important area because it's protecting the hub for the northeast of the country, of course, being Kupiansk, and as well a forest region in here. So we then had a major Russian assault here. I can't show you this footage. Again, it'll be on the Telegram of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-ish armoured vehicles here, then moving into Sinkivka. Now, they dropped off the soldiers, and then it does look like from the footage I've seen, but again, it's a 2-minute video. I'd love to see a 30-minute video and analyze what actually happened there. But it drops off the Russian soldiers, the armored vehicles pull back out, and it does look like the soldiers were picked off by both Ukrainian drones and Ukrainian soldiers inside Sinkivka. So we know that isn't just grey zone. We know Ukraine does actually have control of the maps, saying inside of Sinkivka. Now, people are saying, why did the vehicles drop them off? Well, armoured personnel carriers like APC is different from an IFV. An IFV, like an infantry fighting vehicle, stays and fights with the troops, like a Bradley. But like an M113, that is an APC. It's to take you in. It's a battle taxi. It takes you in, bucks off, lets you fight out from there. We have seen how vulnerable armoured vehicles actually are in this war. And we have seen anything from a Leopard to a Challenger to a BMP to a bloody T90 to a T6, whatever. Incredibly vulnerable. We know both Ukraine and Russia can't just be throwing armor at things like we saw Russia do in the beginning with the limited amount of armor. So trying to protect the armor there, vulnerability to protect the men as well. That's why it goes in, comes out. And I was an ex-mechanized infantry guy. That is not uncommon for something like that to happen. So it is something that may happen. And I don't want to talk about actual like breakdowns here. But of course, this is the positioning on the map here. So it's just on the outskirts of Sinkivka. Let's see if we can get a better view. So this is this intersection where it's coming down, which is this same intersection here. So Russia had entered the grey zone out of here. And this is where they started getting hit, and then the troops got dropped off. But more so, they're trying to make a movement down into here, drop the troops off where they can at some level of positions and fight into Sinkivka. But then the vehicles will more come in. What am I going to do? Let's get rid of this for a second. I'm new to this. So the vehicles will more come in, make the drop, and then go back to a position, maybe on flanks, wherever, and, oh my God, me with technology, and then provide fire support in with 20 mil, 50 cal, whatever, larger weapon systems. That's more how something like this may work rather than entering a built-up urban zone like this. But of course, this was a unsuccessful attack by all measures, at least that the footage that we saw released, and we haven't seen any movement on the map there. So let's just have a look at how this actually looks. So, of course, both Deep State and Surak are fairly close on how the actual map front is looking here. We know Russia down this road here. This is when then they entered the grey zone down in along here, and then hit then these first areas. These are in grey zone, and then got into contact in here, and the vehicles pulled out. And what I'm talking about is, it would make more sense to me. Now, I was an armoured vehicle commander of a protected mobility vehicle in Afghanistan, not of armoured vehicles as far as M113s, Bradleys, anything like that. But I worked in the back of one as mechanised infantry. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a come down here to drop guys off here, come down, drop guys off somewhere, maybe even make an advancement across here somewhere, maybe provide some flank support if you can actually get out through here, but that's probably the exact same as well. So let's cut this away here and then come back out to here, because you will be able to still provide fire support down here. And if you can get at some area on this road, you may be able to fire as well as have sort of somewhat like enfilade fire here, sort of, if it goes more successfully. But of course, doing something like that, if the vehicles get hit, you get hit, well, where the hell are you going to go from there? But legends, that I believe, that's it. I can delete as I go. That is it from today. Legends, look after yourselves. I actually have to go out for dinner with my parents, what will be fantastic, but this video will be up later because of that. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic weekend. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.